Hey there Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. Okay, so in today's video we're going to be talking about the 5 things that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini taking place on the 30th of May 2022. Though before we do dive into today's video, what are some things that you think others should know, that they need to know about this new moon? Let us know in the comment section down below. I, of course, will be talking about 5, but I am sure there are plenty more things to discuss. Okay, so on that note, I do hope that you find this video to be helpful. Let's do this. So the first thing that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini is that it will conjunct the sun in Gemini at 9 degrees. And the number 9 in numerology represents things like wisdom, experience, compassion, sympathy, greater awareness, and insight. It is a number of completion. And what I find interesting about this is that around this time last year, we had this powerful solar eclipse in the sign of Gemini. And back in 2020, we experienced a lunar eclipse in Gemini. And so this is the first new moon in Gemini since those eclipses occurred. And I also find it interesting that this is the first new moon after the eclipse season that we all just experienced. What a ride. Therefore, could it be suggested that we are starting fresh? We are ending a cycle whilst simultaneously embracing a new one. Also remember that the North Node was in Gemini during those eclipses in Gemini. And so things like curiosity, lightheartedness, humor, adaptability, variety, and investigation were being highlighted. Therefore, ask yourself what you learned during those eclipses. What did you gain and what did you let go of when it came to these Gemini themes that I just mentioned? Did you set intentions to share information in a new way? Did you set out to switch things up intellectually or socially? Did you aim to seek more variety? Did you welcome greater humor and childlikeness into your life? Or did you seek to learn something new, a new subject, a new skill, a new practice? Maybe you considered how you teach and how you communicate. Or maybe you realized how many things you were juggling at once. Then again, perhaps you're like me and you realize that variety is what keeps you interested and engaged. And so, as we experience this new moon in Gemini, perhaps there are a few things you have still to complete. Some things you haven't quite grasped, but you can set new intentions to finish those things up or to make adjustments. You can use this new moon to plant new seeds to do with your learning process or to do with your communicative style. You can embrace a new beginning to do with any intellectual projects that you were heavily thinking about during those eclipses in Gemini. But moving forward, you do wish to switch things up. A certain spice or flavor hasn't been added to the recipe or the formula yet. Perhaps there is something you haven't thought of yet, and maybe during this new moon you start to have the insight. You possess greater awareness. Perhaps it feels as if an idea or a thought, well, they click into place, The ideas keep flowing and everything just makes sense. Or perhaps the way you think of something changes, or the delivery of a message catches your focus in a whole new way. Essentially, we are reframing our thoughts and our ideas. We are reframing our minds. Though following on from this point, remember that Mercury was recently retrograde in Gemini from May 10th until May 22nd of this year. And during that time, we were rethinking what was happening 10 days prior. So Mercury entered Gemini on the 29th of April of this year, and it turned retrograde on the 10th of May. So try to recall the things that were on your mind during that time from April 29th to May 10th. I suppose this is why it's really beneficial, it's really good to keep a journal. But maybe, for example, you were getting creative during that time, or you were playing around with ideas. Maybe you were interested in something, or you wanted to learn something new, or maybe teaching or writing or instructing were on your mind. Perhaps during the Mercury retrograde in Gemini between May 10th and May 22nd, you were rethinking and re-evaluating the intellectual things that came up or the social things that came up. Or quite possibly, you find it challenging to focus on these things. I know I certainly did. Perhaps you got caught up in overthinking or worrying, or maybe you're like me, overanalyzing. Perhaps you felt nervous or intellectually drained. Or maybe one thought led to another, and then to another, and then to another. Next thing, you're down a rabbit hole. Then again, maybe you realized that there were other intellectual and communicative things you had to attend to beforehand. Some things from the past that were not finished or addressed completely. Therefore, during this new moon in Gemini, you set new intentions in relation to what you rethought during the Mercury retrograde. Now, whilst you might have greater awareness, also remember that Mercury is still retrograde in the sign of Taurus during this new moon. It will be retrograde in Taurus until June 3rd. So during this new moon, you may still be rethinking a few things, but more on that shortly. I'll talk about that more. However, when Mercury re-enters Gemini on June 13th, especially when it's at 9 degrees on June 22nd, well, perhaps you can think a lot more clearly. You feel ready to embrace this new intellectual or communicative venture. And perhaps you also feel excited and motivated, seeing as the moon, Jupiter and Mars will all be in Aries on June 22nd. You just want to get things started and moving. You are ready to go after your intellectual and communicative goals. So let's say this new moon is taking place in your second house. So looking at you Taurus, sun, moon and risings. Perhaps during this new moon, you set new intentions in relation to your earning potential and your physical security. Maybe there are a few financial matters you are finishing up or making adjustments to, but you're wanting to make a change. During the Mercury retrograde in Gemini from May 10th until May 22nd, perhaps you were continuously revisiting things to do with your resources, but you felt a desire to spice things up. Yet, your overthinking kept you going over the same thing. But during this new moon, you set intentions to think of things in a new way. You seek a greater perspective. And when Mercury re-enters Gemini from June 13th onwards, you are ready to make those changes. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your 10th house, so looking at you Virgo, sun, moon and risings. Perhaps during this new moon, you set new intentions in relation to your life work and your reputation. Perhaps there are a few ambition matters you are finishing up, but you feel ready to embrace something new. And during the Mercury retrograde in Gemini from May 10th until May 22nd, perhaps you were rattling your brains about your profession. Maybe you felt eager to change something, to seek variety, but you kept thinking about things over and over. As someone with a Virgo rising, I can certainly relate to this. But during this new moon, you set intentions to think of things in a new way. You seek a greater perspective. And when Mercury re-enters Gemini from June 13th onwards, you are ready to make those changes. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your 6th house, so looking at you Capricorn, sun, moon and risings. Perhaps during this new moon, you set new intentions in relation to your occupation and your daily practices. Perhaps there are a few routine/daily habit matters you are finishing up, but you feel a need to have a fresh set of eyes. And during the Mercury retrograde in Gemini from May 10th until May 22nd, perhaps you find it difficult to wrap your head around the type of services you wanted to provide, or maybe you were rethinking your schedules and time management. You wanted to change something, but you kept revisiting possible solutions or problems. But during this new moon, you set intentions to think of things in a new way. You seek a greater perspective. And when Mercury re-enters Gemini from June 13th onwards, you are ready to make those changes. And with all of this talk about Mercury retrograde, this leads me to the second thing that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini, and that is that Mercury will be retrograde in the sign of Taurus during it. And Mercury will trine Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. Okay, so like I said, Mercury is still retrograde in the sign of Taurus until June 3rd. Therefore, during this new moon, you may still be going over things. Could be things to do with your talents or your skills, or to do with money, or to do with your self-worth, or to do with security. Perhaps you go over the credibility of the information you're learning, or you want to learn and share in a much more thorough and attentive way. Or maybe you wish to communicate in a reasonable and sensible way, in a practical way, or you rethink the value of what you know or the value of what you're learning. Then again, you might stick to what you know, or you might be possessive of the information you're learning about. Now, Mercury was in Taurus from April 10th until April 29th. And so during those 3 weeks, perhaps you wanted to communicate your ideas practically, or maybe you thought about how you could earn money from your teachings, or maybe you set out to demonstrate the things that you had learned, or you wanted to ground the information you were learning, or perhaps it's that money and your earning potential were really on your mind, or it could be that you thought about the style of the information that you were delivering back then, or you communicated with much more patience, with greater patience. And interestingly, during this new moon in Gemini, Mercury retrograde will be in Taurus at 26 degrees. Therefore, you may be revisiting, re-examining the things that were on your mind throughout those 3 weeks back in April. Especially the things that sprung to mind on April 26th or so. I know for me, I had been thinking about how to share information in a practical way back in April, okay? But throughout May, I have just been up and down with things. I've been so scattered. Other things have been grabbing my attention. Eventually, I know things will click in place. But for now, I'm trying to just go through the creative process. Maybe that's just something to consider with this Mercury retrograde. It's going with the creative process. Then again, maybe I'm being too lazy or stagnant. Who knows? But something will budge soon. I hope. I hope that I'll get the mental clarity that I need moving forward. Moreover, with Pluto retrograde being in Capricorn and making a trine to Mercury retrograde in Taurus, Well, there is something highly transformative about this process. Perhaps we come up with a groundbreaking idea, for example, or we can feel a profound need for change coming. Perhaps things feel intellectually intense, or we experience all this passion and desire to push intellectual boundaries. But again, it's these things that we are reassessing, okay? And when Mercury does go direct from June 3rd onwards, we're determined to ground our ideas, to ground the things we have learned, to materialize what was on our minds during Mercury retrograde. Yes, Mercury will still be in its shadow period, but we have this transformed mental willpower, so to speak. And yes, Pluto will still be retrograde, suggesting inner fears and feelings of powerlessness, but our mindset keeps us steadily moving. So let's say this new moon is taking place in your first house, so looking at you Gemini, sun, moon and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you revisit a few practical matters to do with your time in solitude or to do with spiritual practices. Maybe there is something you haven't thought about yet to do with relaxation or renewal. So as you are setting new intentions in relation to your identity and your life path, you're also rethinking a few things behind the scenes. Perhaps you also feel these intensities within your intimate relationships, and when Mercury goes retrograde from June 3rd, basically you are determined to ground your spiritual ideas, or to ground the ideas that you came up with behind the scenes. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your 9th house, so looking at you Libra, sun, moon and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you rethink a few practical things to do with your shared resources and finances. Maybe there is something that just springs to mind to do with intimacy or vulnerability. So as you are setting new intentions in regards to your self-discovery and your philosophies, you're also revisiting what your partner brings to the table. Perhaps you also experience these transformations within your home too. And when Mercury goes direct from June 3rd, you are determined to ground your commitment ideas. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your 5th house, so looking at you Aquarius, sun, moon and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you revise a few practical matters to do with your home and your family. Maybe there is something that you haven't taken into consideration yet to do with your mother or to do with your emotional security. So as you are setting new intentions in regards to children or your creativity, you are also revisiting how you take care of others and how others take care of you. And you may also experience profound endings behind the scenes. And when Mercury goes direct from June 3rd onwards, you are determined to ground your living situation ideas. The third thing that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini is that the sun and moon will quintile Neptune in Pisces during it. What a lovely moon to dream and imagine, to think about the many possibilities that exist. But at the same time, we may find it challenging to put our many ideas and thoughts in order. A stream of thought just leads to another and to another. This can suggest a high level of creativity and curiosity. Perhaps music and art and movement can inspire us during this time, or perhaps getting lost in our thoughts and in our imagination can do us wonders. Who knows what our imagination can ponder up, what stories we can tell, what art we can create due to the many symbolic messages we receive during this new moon. Perhaps as you set these new intellectual and communicative intentions, you can visualize. You can let your mind wander for a bit, to live in that dream world and have fun with it, to play around in it for a while, because who knows what talents may arise, what amazing ideas can transpire, what desires you indulge in, And interestingly, I pulled the Nine of Cups on the morning of typing this script, and the Nine of Cups very much communicates this message of having our dreams come true. Maybe by allowing our minds to wander, so many things will come up that don't make sense, but that's okay. Maybe that's the beauty of our imagination, that's the beauty of creativity. And like I said, who knows what can arise from that space? Maybe we end up achieving the things we thought we wanted. We obtain the things we hoped for. All it took was for us to invite a little mystery into our lives. So let's say this new moon is taking place in your 12th house. So looking at you Cancer, Sun, Moon and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you set new intentions when it comes to retreating and behind the scenes activity. Perhaps you're seeking more variety. Maybe there are things you would like to change about the way you relax and unwind, or perhaps you think about the ways you prefer to escape. And at the same time, there are things you're dreaming about in regards to travel or publishing or advanced training. Maybe you feel this deep need to get away or to take a trip somewhere abroad, or maybe you allow your mind to wander, and what arises from your curiosity is a whole new wonderful adventure. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your 8th house, so looking at you Scorpio, Sun, Moon and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you set new intentions when it comes to shared resources and joint finances. Maybe you explore new options and you're pretty adaptable. Perhaps there are some things you want to switch up in relation to intimacy and emotional closeness within partnerships. Or perhaps you consider intellectual closeness. And at the same time, there are things you're dreaming about in relation to love, creativity, and pleasure. Perhaps you feel a strong need to be close, to feel spiritually connected. Or maybe you dream of a nice holiday somewhere, or maybe you have these new creative visions. Maybe you allow your mind to wander, and what arises from your intrigue is a much deeper bond. The fourth thing that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini is that the Sun and Moon will sextile Jupiter and Mars in Aries during it. Now, Jupiter entered Aries on May 10th and it will continue to be in Aries until October 28th. It will move back into Pisces for a few weeks until it moves into Aries at the end of December once again. And it will remain in Aries until May 2023. So, with Jupiter being in Aries, especially with Mars being home in Aries, we might feel this strong passion to go after our goals. We may want to take bigger risks. We may feel greater confidence, or we might be a lot more spontaneous than usual. We may also be feeling extra adventurous. Perhaps we experience these huge waves of excitement, and we experience this fired up enthusiasm and optimism. And throughout the process, we inspire others, or perhaps we teach others a thing or two about our leadership, about the wisdom we gain regarding leadership. There is something largely enterprising about this energy. And so with the Sun and Moon in Gemini making a sextile to Jupiter and Mars in Aries, perhaps we feel supported on our mission. Our thoughts strengthen our motivation, drive, and energy levels, and our self-assertion strengthens our mindset, our speech, and our intellectual abilities. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We feel this urge to jump right in and to make things happen. And we have belief in ourselves. These beliefs that say, you know what? I can do this. So let's say this new moon is taking place in your 4th house. So looking at you Pisces, Sun, Moon, and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you set new intentions when it comes to your home, when it comes to your family. Maybe you are seeking to change something, or you're seeking a change of scenery, or maybe you want to connect with family members, or perhaps there is something you want to switch up regarding your private space or regarding interior design. And with Jupiter and Mars transiting your second house, you have these big security goals. Maybe you feel confident about the financial situation or about your financial situation. You feel this excitement regarding your possessions or potential investments. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your third house. So looking at you, Aries, sun, moon, and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you set new intentions when it comes to your education, when it comes to your learning style. Maybe you want to switch up how you communicate or how you learn. Or maybe there is something you want to change regarding your speech, regarding your delivery. Or it could be that you are willing to play around with new ideas. And with Jupiter and Mars transiting your first house, you have these big identity goals. Maybe you have this fired up optimism regarding your life path. You feel this just surge of energy rushing through your body to get things moving. And as somebody who has an Aries moon, I can certainly relate to this. And the fifth and final thing that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini taking place on the 30th of May 2022 is that Mercury retrograde in Taurus will square Saturn in Aquarius during it. Okay, so we briefly talked about the Mercury retrograde in Taurus, but let's explore this Saturn in Aquarius energy a little bit. So Saturn in Aquarius has been highlighting things like the effort we bring to a group, how we mature within our groups and alliances, times when we feel judged and ridiculed by others, times when we experience restrictions and obstacles within our communities, within our teams, knowing we have views that are different from other people's, and being respected for our unique perspective, and also being respected for the hope that we bring others. And so with this square between Saturn and Mercury, perhaps during this new moon, we find ourselves actually allowing the opinions of others to impact our self-worth. Or maybe we think heavily about our friendships, about our social circles, but not in a very kind way, in a very serious, critical, and judgmental way. Perhaps there are things that need to be thought about with greater seriousness and responsibility, but at the same time, maybe we aren't happy. We're not happy with some thoughts that come up or with some decisions that must be made. The steadiness of our mind is challenged by this notion that we are left out, or that we are rejected, or that we're left behind. We are the outsider and others don't want us to join in. Or perhaps it's that we are overthinking things, and this is not very practical at all. Or maybe we experience tension within our friendships or within our group circles, within teams, because of miscommunication, or because we are questioning our self-worth. Now, with that being said, perhaps such errors are more a result of how we are feeling about ourselves. Maybe it's our own critical thinking that leads to communication barriers, or it could be that there are some valuable things to consider. So for example, do you feel heard? Are you listened to? Are your opinions taken into consideration? And do you feel respected? Are you respected? So let's say this new moon is taking place in your 11th house. So looking at you, Leo, sun, moon, and risings. During this new moon, perhaps you set new intentions when it comes to your hopes and wishes for the future, but maybe there are some conversations you have with your boss or your manager, serious conversations regarding your future as a member of the team. Maybe you want to be treated with greater respect, or maybe you experience some tension whilst overthinking your ambitions. Maybe you have these fears of being outcasted or rejected for your hopes, or maybe it's your mindset that is limiting you. Still, there are changes you would like to make, changes regarding your place within society. Also, changes regarding your place within groups and organizations and teams that you're a part of. Or let's say this new moon is taking place in your 7th house. So looking at you, Sagittarius, sun, moon, and risings. During this new moon, maybe you set new intentions when it comes to your partnerships, when it comes to your relationships, but maybe there are some serious conversations to be had regarding work or regarding your day-to-day responsibilities. Perhaps you want to feel heard, you want your opinions to be taken seriously, or maybe there is some miscommunication about how valued you are as an employee or as someone who attends to chores. Perhaps you are seeking greater recognition from your partner, or maybe you realize how critical or how judgmental you can be towards yourself. Still, there are changes you would like to make, changes regarding give and take within your relationships and partnerships. Okay then, Cosmic Warriors, so that concludes my video talking about the 5 things that you need to know about this new moon in Gemini taking place on the 30th of May 2022. Now again, if there are other things that you think others need to know, should know about this new moon in Gemini, then let us know in the comment section. Now I do hope that you find this video to be helpful and useful as always, and moreover, please let us know your thoughts and your opinions in the comment section down below too. But with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, thank you for subscribing, and of course if you would like to see more videos from myself and you have not yet subscribed, then make sure that you click that subscribe button and also give this video a like if you did like it, and I will be back with another video very, very soon. Happy new moon.